Today I want to talk about the amazing digital circus, when we're going to get episode 6, and what I think's gonna happen in this episode. My name's Deepcut, welcome back to Cartoon Universe, and if you die in the YouTube comment section, do you die in real life? Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the potential release date for episode 6. Until recently, I felt like a lot of the videos on YouTube were putting out a bit of misinformation about how the shows tend to work, with weird claims about when to expect the next episode, with some people even claiming in their videos that the episodes may be delayed until after the Gaslight District episode 2, simply to punish the viewers of the amazing digital circus and trying to make them act more polite. This was based on a tweet that Gooseworks put out that I think is pretty clearly a joke, because that just isn't how a business works, even an indie business on YouTube. Now, apparently recently, Gooseworks did do a live stream with one of the voice actors from the show where they got into a lot of what will happen in episode 6 and said that the new episode will come out within the next 4 months. 4 months is given as a maximum here, and that sounds about right based on the production of the show. When it came to episodes 3 and 4, there was actually very little gap between them because the two episodes were being produced together at the same time by the same studio. This meant that some work was being done on episode 4 before episode 3 had actually finished, but because of that, by the time episode 3 was actually done, episode 4 was pretty close to completion as well. Episode 3 released in October of 2024, and episode 4 came out just a few months later in December. Really just 2 months and 10 days, which means that we might actually get the new episode a lot faster than Gooseworks is even saying. The reason they give the estimate of no more than about 4 months is because the production of these indie shows can be very hard to manage and predict. It's the reason we get new episodes every few months instead of just week to week. And this same production pattern is being used for episodes 5 and 6. With that in mind, it could come out 4 months from now, but it could also make it out a lot earlier just depending on how the crew does their work. Still, with that in mind, we should be getting the new episode no later than late October or early November, it seems. Now, I do have theories for how this is going to go, but before we get into that, I also want to talk about the idea some people are putting out there that the episodes will be intentionally delayed either by Gooseworks or by Glitch themselves. We already discussed the idea of Gooseworks claiming that they would delay the episode of the amazing digital circus if people didn't act more polite to the other shows that are being run by Glitch, such as the Gaslight District. Now, we've already addressed how that just isn't how a company works, and there's no way that a company like Glitch would delay an episode in order to punish its audience and then expect them to pay for merchandise right afterwards. It would also just be a huge punishment to everyone who loves the show, as opposed to just the people who are hating on the Gaslight District. Beyond that, however, some people are claiming that Glitch will actually delay this episode anyways, just to make sure that the Gaslight District is released in between. It does make sense from a business perspective to try and space your shows out from one another so that you go through each of them before returning to the first one to release a new episode of it. This is how normal television tends to work, or at least used to work, with there being new episodes dropped once a week for each of the different shows. But even if that's what Glitch wants to do, the production of these two shows is just too complicated, I would say, for them to actually maintain this. With what we've discussed so far, it seems pretty obvious that they just release the episodes as soon as they can, not just when the episode is complete, but also when the merchandise they have is complete in order to sell. We saw this play out with the ending of Murder Drones and the Amazing Digital Circus, where sometimes we'd go back and forth between the two shows, getting an episode of Murder Drones in between episodes of the Amazing Digital Circus. But when episode 3 and 4 were completed very close to each other back to back, it made sense to release them back to back as well. Not even waiting another month, it would seem, to try and give more time for the rest of their productions to get more done. Plus, one delay could ruin everything for the other production. For instance, if the Amazing Digital Circus finished an episode and then the Gaslight District was expected to finish another episode to be released before it, but then got delayed, the Amazing Digital Circus would have delayed itself for no reason. From there, more and more episodes of the Amazing Digital Circus would get complete and would be backed up in the release line, as well as all of the merchandise that they have to sell with each unique episode. So all of this is just a way to explain that there's no way that the Amazing Digital Circus is going to delay its episodes just so that another one can finish production and release before it. Maybe if it was something like there was just a few weeks apart where it seemed like the production was going to very obviously be finished, but as a general rule, it just doesn't make any sense to delay one show in order to release another. Now, as far as my theories on episode 6, we know from Gooseworks' early post that episode 5 was meant to be a Ragatha-focused episode, and that episode 6 would focus on Jax. Episode 5 was a Ragatha episode ultimately, but it also focused on everyone else, and I would say that Ragatha is the kind of character that gets a lot of her development in everyone else's story. Episode 4 was very obviously a Gangle episode, for instance, but we also learned quite a bit about Ragatha there, and to some people, we we actually learned more about her there than in her actual episode 5. I expect this pattern to play out with episode 6, which is supposed to be a Jax episode, but Jax is pretty tied to Ragatha in terms of their drama and internal conflict. Episode 5 was very much about setting up Jax's episode 6 with her comment that reminded him of his abstracted friend who we see on a door during the intermission. The intermission was a very trippy and surreal sequence that ended up being a little bit prophetic with that last moment of Jax running down the hall. Now, what a lot of people are hoping for is an episode that's basically dedicated to this character who we know to be Ribbit from some of Gooseworks' posts online. They were a player character like Jax and Ragatha and the others are who abstracted recently before Kaufmo did. This person appears to be Jax's only friend in the circus, and without him, he seems to be in an antagonistic dynamic with everyone else. While I think this episode will get a little bit into this character, I'm not sure it will be a big focus episode that everyone else seems to think it will be. I could be wrong, as Gooseworks did say that episode 5 is basically the calm before the silly storm. And even with them saying that, episode 5 was still extremely dramatic and lore-driven. As the intermission in episode 5 indicates, it's actually the halfway point in the series, and it makes sense that from here, we're just gonna get crazier and crazier with the stories. And the original outline that Gooseworks gave us of what to expect, it's after this episode that they stopped giving us any solid answers. Every episode before this is supposed to focus on a specific character, but after Jax's character in episode 6, it's supposed to get a lot crazier with Gooseworks trying not to spoil things. Because of that, some of the fans may be right that this will be a huge Ribbit-focused episode, and perhaps even that Ribbit and other characters will somehow return. There was a huge freakout with a Digital Circus commercial recently that Gooseworks said they actually put a little bit more attention into and oversight because of something canon that would happen within it. A lot of people believe that this is the reveal of Kaufmo's canon voice, and that got me thinking that this new episode may be starting to build into these characters returning. We know that the goal of Kane is to unabstract these characters, and if that was actually possible, it could lead to some very dramatic ending for the series. With Gooseworks not wanting to tell us which character is being focused on in the episodes after episode 6, it's entirely possible that episode 7 is going to be about Ribbit, and episode 8 could even be about Kaufmo. But if Gooseworks had explained this in the original post, that would have been some pretty huge spoilers. One way or another, this new episode is probably going to be one of the most epic in the entire series. But beyond it being about Jax and maybe Ribbit, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen. Some people think this episode is going to focus on Jax himself becoming more unhinged, building off of the characters beginning to rally against him in the previous episode. It makes sense for this pattern to continue with Jax trying to get back on top socially, but pushing him farther and farther away from everyone else. Everyone else except maybe Pomni. For me personally, I could see the episode ending with Pomni saving him emotionally, being there to talk to him the way she has been for Gangle at the end of episode 4, and Kinger at the end of episode 3, and even Gummigoo at the end of episode 2. The only person she didn't really try to comfort in their episode is Ragatha, interestingly, and she actually ends Ragatha's episode going off to hang out with Jax, so maybe that's setting something up. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and don't forget to join the Cartoon Universe Discord server to talk more about the Digital Circus until the new episode drops. See you guys there.